It's been a crazy year and a crazy time for all of us. And for me, having a baby at age 48 was a real game changer. Instead of reading notes all day, my usual thing, I'm reading to my son, Jeremy. And hint, don't mix the whites and the colors or you're going to end up with a pink shirt on a boy. Instead of counting rests with the orchestra, I'm resting now with my son. He's even feeding me now. So quite literally, the tables are now reversed. You might say the whole world right now is just upside down. I'm John Fox. I'm the principal percussionist and associate principal timpanist of your Singapore Symphony Orchestra. And in these times, I can't chat with you or perform for you from Esplanade, so I'm here in my home. Instead of playing on beautiful snare drums that we have there, I'm playing on a practice pad. Instead of playing on beautiful accessories, percussion instruments, we have these baby percussion instruments. Can't really use those. And teaching at the conservatory, it's now by Zoom. And I think this sums it all up right here. Things really are upside down and not necessarily in a cute baby sort of way. There are stressors and stresses in work and home life. Every week, heroes like frontline workers rise, heroes of previous generations fall. Kids are busy studying at home and schedules need to be carefully synced up. Without concerts, things like that, there's little escape and stimulation from those outside of our immediate families and beyond the walls of our homes. So this is why I'm here right now. I'll be hosting weekly conversation with an interesting international top-tier artist. Some will share their music, some personal thoughts. Some of them will share both. They all will have some connection to the SSO or Singapore or both. And their perspectives are really important because with all the emotion and wild unpredictability that we're facing now, we can get perspective from our own doorstep in Singapore, as well as Malaysia, Philippines, Japan, and the USA. That's all on tap here. In fact, with the SSO and community, I've never felt more a part of this community than during this time. So projects like this are really, really important. Leads me to our first guest, Joanna Dong, and she's remarkable and has continued to reinvent herself and in fact gotten busier during these difficult times. She's a singer, she's an actor, she's a host, but she's been more active than ever on social media. She's promoting NGOs, all the best of Singapore and great things in the world. She is a sign of versatility that's necessary to get through this, and she will get through this. I'm absolutely convinced. If anyone can, Joanna can. Joanna, are you there?
I am. Hi, John. How are you?
Are you awake after that?
Oh, no. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
It was great to see pictures of you and your kids. So sweet.
He keeps me busy. Are you busy? Are you busy, actually busier, like I was suggesting, maybe during these times than maybe you would be otherwise?
Well, of course, at the beginning, when they first canceled all the big shows, I was suddenly out of work. And it happened for me much earlier than most other people. So the circuit breaker period in Singapore started, I want to say, in March. But for me, I had no work since the beginning of February because nearly all of my shows were, had a big attendance, and all those were advised to cancel or postpone. So I had to start thinking about how am I going to continue to engage my audiences, if this was to go on for a reasonably long period, as it sure looks like it is going to. And so I was like, okay, I finally have to resign myself to the fact that I have to go online. I have to do more of the social media engagement that I think a lot of younger artists and singers were already doing. But I had just almost been so stubborn and obstinate. Like I refused to get on the bandwagon, because it was just more things to learn, to have to do. And I just felt really reluctant to commit to doing something online. It's almost like at the moment you start that, it opens like a floodgate of expectations that your fans will say, oh, but why are you only doing this once? And so I was like, but I had to go there. And so the past 2, 3 weeks have been really busy trying to learn to use technology. And now I'm nowhere near a certified, professional audio engineer, but I sure know a hell of a lot more than when I started out a few weeks ago.
It's so amazing to see everything on social media that you're doing. And you just mentioned, though, it kind of, or suggested, it does open up a new world, doesn't it? About you, of course, you want to be understood by the public, by your fans, by your peers, by people that you want to show your talents, the things that you have to offer. But what about that line sort of that you draw where, okay, I'm on Facebook, I'm on these things, people are going to throw their comments out there. I don't want them to misunderstand, but I want them to know who I really am.
Yeah, there's always this tension between, being a public figure and then your own personal life. And I think what drives me as a person is I crave to be understood, but that then becomes complicated. So the more people get to know me, I think just because it's a probability thing, the more numbers, the bigger the number of people know you, I think the larger the number of people who are not going to understand you. And it's nobody's fault, because it's just, we are all really busy. There's so much going on in our lives. Nobody is going to take the effort and the time to go and really get to know somebody who's just, a distant public figure. And so that's also why I feel wary about exposing so much of my personal life. Now in my live streams, people see my home. It used to be in a more neutral setting, like a studio or outdoors at a specific venue like the Esplanade. But once I bring people into my very personal space, I have these real fears about the personal and the public intermingling, and somehow, somewhere, things are misunderstood. But at the same time, I realize that that's exactly what audiences want to see. Now, if they've already seen me on big stages, they've seen me in all the public spheres, and to be able to, have a little peek into my living room, I think it satisfies like everybody's very primal voyeuristic tendencies. And I think they really enjoy that I'm more relaxed, I'm myself. When I'm doing big shows, there is a lot of curation, whether it's the repertoire, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of sound checking, there's rehearsals. Everything is, my usual performance standard would be, we're trying to aim for something that's really slick, really perfect. But for my live streams, it's chaotic. Just last night I had utter mayhem, and also right like before I finished talking, the feed just cut because my phone had ran out of battery. So it was major boo-boos all around. But I think that's also partly what endears it to the audiences, because they feel like that comes off as more honest, less contrived. And I kind of enjoy.
I think that's right. Less contrived seems to be a thing now. People are more forgiving, right? They're more forgiving of a little bit of an issue with the sound or video, or they see someone's hair not perfect, or someone's a little out of tune or whatever. But and I'm telling my students, if they want perfect, they can get a CD. But if they want really greatness and see the artist and see the artistry, then you go live, and it's not perfect. Just so in case you're wondering, Joanna, I live in a padded cell of just this curtain all around me, and that's my home. So you have full insight into my life here. Your personal aspect that you're talking about, this celebrity thing. I mean, were your parents public figures as well?
No, not at all. In fact, my mother, she's very, very private as a person. And interestingly enough, me becoming a public figure is also, puts her in a paradox, because she's the kind of mother who always wanted me to succeed. And I think in many ways she saw her own success as a mother, as a woman, as dependent on my success as her offspring, as someone that she's put a lot of effort into nurturing. And so she's actually always been the one actively trying to push me into the limelight. She'll be the one to, cut all the paper clippings if I appeared in the press. She'll watch every single one of my news interviews, and I'm sure she will watch this one as well. So she's very supportive of me being public and well known. Like it brings us so much pride. But you can imagine that um, an externality of me being a public figure is that I almost inevitably will talk about her as I am doing now, and then so I'm her own private life or her own matters get exposed to the public as well, quite beyond her own control. And so that's her own struggle. She wants me to be public, but she wants to remain private, and that's always at odds. And I try to respect that privacy. But again, like I said, it's very hard for people to understand me. And that is something that I crave. I want people to understand me, but they can't understand me unless they understand where I came from, how I was brought up. And that cannot be separated from me talking about my mom, my parents, their marriage. And so, yeah, I feel apologetic to my mom, but at the same time, I think slowly she's also understanding where I'm coming from. And she's also slowly, I think, become more open about her own life. I think that generation, they also carry around just so much social expectations that they feel that there's a lot of self-censorship and self-judgment. And so she's always afraid, oh, what are people going to think? What are people going to say if they knew this and this? But I think slowly she's kind of learning to see my point of view as well. So I'm
wow.
glad.
Well, was she the one who got you involved in contests and things? From what I've seen, you have been doing competitions since really, really young. So at around age 5.
Yeah.
On this photo, right? So you're already, what is this that we're looking at here? What is this?
This is, interestingly enough, not a singing competition. This was actually a fancy dress competition. And this is the very first contest I participated in. And it was really just an excuse for my mom to show off her handiwork, because my mom is really good at sewing, great at crafts. She's a very creative person. But interestingly enough, my mom is not a musical person. In my family, the musical person is my dad. But after the divorce, I don't see that much of him. And so it was my mom who sent me to singing classes, my mom who sent me to singing competitions. She always nurtured my talent. But my mother herself is pretty much what lay people would consider tone deaf. She's just not musical. But as you can see from the costumes that I think you will see in some other photos as well, she's just so artistic, so creative. And I think I've also absorbed, quite a lot of that from her. But yeah, that was me singing Little Bo Peep in a fancy dress competition. And I won a prize, I think, not just because of the costume, but because all the other kids just walked up and paraded, whereas I sang a song. So it was like bonus points for this kid, Yeah.
Well, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So Mom, you're watching? Seriously
job,
great. Maybe there you go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But you went through a series of other things. I mean, you did have singing competition by 7 and 8 years old.
So after that, there you go. That's me holding a big ass trophy. And this was my very first proper singing competition. Now, I was born in 1981, so this is maybe the late 80s. I'm probably 6 years old here. So this was the peak of karaoke fever in Singapore. And like everywhere, there were lots and lots of these karaoke competitions. And of course, many of them were organized just for children. And this was my first time joining it. I remember the song that I sang in the finals was a Chinese song called My Family is So Lovely. 我的家庭真可爱. And here I am holding the trophy. I actually placed first. I was like champion on my first competition outing. And of course, that gave me a lot of pride and a lot of confidence. But as you can imagine, it is really hard to cope with failure after you've won first place on your first contest.
You've had plenty of success in these first places, but that maybe is a good, maybe it makes sense to move on to talk about Singapore Idol then, which I watched. Yeah. I came here 20 years ago in 2000. Yeah. So this was 4 or 5 years into my stay, just 4 years in 2004. What was that experience like? Because probably not a perfect experience like you just described, maybe at age 7 and 8.
So you have to understand that. So as a kid, I joined these competitions and I really enjoyed it. But I think when I became a little older, say about 13, 14, in my early teens, I started having this awareness that, hey, it seems like maybe it wasn't so cool to be in these competitions. I think because like when you're a teen, you're just really self-conscious about many things. And I started feeling like, oh, I didn't want to compete anymore. It was just not cool anymore to be a competition kid. And so I started telling my mom, no, I don't want to do any more of them. And I didn't compete solo all the way until Singapore Idol. So if I had competed in anything, it was always with the school choir, it was something else, or it was representing the school. But I never did any of these so-called singing competitions, pop singing competitions, till Singapore Idol. And Singapore Idol, I was just out of university. And during my last few years of university, that's when I got to know jazz and I fell in love with jazz music. I thought, hey, maybe I could make a career out of this. And so when the first ever Singapore Idol rolled around after my graduation, I thought this is perfect. I'm straight out of school. I have, time on my hands. I could do this competition. And if I make it, it would be my big break into becoming a full-time musician or a professional singer. But that experience, I think, really threw me off balance. Um, Firstly, the auditions were extremely stressful. And because it was, after all, a reality TV competition, I think the reality
Was
aspect of
everyone
it.
trying to be Simon Cowell? Was everyone sort of, I'm going to be the tough guy. I'm going to
Well,
be the,
yeah. Well, there were a couple of judges, and Ken Lim. I think he was like the equivalent of Simon Cowell,
mm,
and yeah. But all the judges, they had different roles to play. Some of them were nice, some of them were cheeky, some of them were the more harsh critics. So, but all that was to create drama, and I was a little caught up in all of it. Tensions were really strung high. Emotions were really, like really just everything was on overdrive. And I only made it to top 40. And to be honest, I was really pleased that I made it past the auditions. It was still, a sort of validation that I was, at least top 40 in the nation level of singing. But in the very first voting round, which is when audiences would call in and vote for their favorite singers to make it into the next round, that was where I was eliminated. So basically, the judges or whoever was auditioning me liked me, but the audience didn't. The audience didn't vote me in, and that was a huge blow to my 20-something-year-old psyche. And
I can understand that.
it was
And,
hard.
and uh, my wife and I watch Sing China, and I think we both share the same gripe. Maybe you do. I think you do as well. Having heard you say that there are these moments where the press or whomever they are suddenly are holding up their signs, and suddenly they have all the power and they have the say. And who are they? You can have Naing saying something, but what about
Yeah.
this person who's works for a newspaper and somewhere in this place or another, and they have the fate right in their hands. And in addition to that, not just possible ignorance, but what if there are politics or they have their own agendas and all? And I've often been very frustrated by those moments.
Well, it is also heavily edited. There are 50 people on that panel, some of who are music industry professionals. And of course, like you alluded to, some of them are media professionals and not music trained at all. But I guess they put together that 50 strong panel precisely because they wanted like a representation of opinions. And I have to say that between Singapore Idol and Sing China, I went through a huge amount of personal growth. When I came out of Singapore Idol, I was like, okay, the public doesn't like me. And so since they reject me, I reject them as well. It was
Mhm.
almost a little bit vindictive, but also it was coming from a place of a lot of hurt and insecurity. And I think that's when I began to dive deep into singing more jazz standards and pretty much only singing jazz. I tried to do very little pop in those years because I was just, yeah, why should I care about pleasing an audience that doesn't seem to like me or like the music that I like anyway? And it was
Well,
good.
let's talk about that
Yeah.
because Yeah, I think because
So
you
much
stood
angst.
out in this
You can hear the
competition.
angst, can't you? You can still hear the
Yeah.
angst. It's still deep there
I
somewhere.
listen. For us, the extent of auditioning is behind a screen playing some excerpts, and it's harder than that. But it's we play to a wall. There's some people on the other side, and we get the job or not. But we are not publicly putting ourselves out there and the stuff. But what you mentioned, you really stood out in that competition because you dared be very different. Long before, this was my introduction to you, and you stood out in that you were singing jazz, and the covers that you were singing were understated. I'm used to in the competition, if I dare say, in Sing China, there's always going to be that key change, and then the second that people and scream something, the hand is
they
on the
press the
button, or
button.
people stand up and scream, and you drew people in a very, very different way, and it really, truly, you really are a truly distinctive artist in that way. Let's check
Well,
out some of the stuff. I want to bring you back. Yeah.
sure.
Some
So,
memories. I'm sure you'll have stuff to say because Sing China is very interesting to me, and I think a lot of people. So let's look at your face here. This is the audition, right? If we go back to the audition, what are we seeing? Obviously expressive, but what are you feeling during this audition?
Man, well, I mean, this photo only captures the top half, but you do know like the rest of it is a big skirt. It's like a big, like quite baggy, shapeless skirt. And beneath that skirt, my legs were jelly. I was trembling. In fact, at some points, I think I try and hold the mic with both hands because it was shaking so much from nerves that I had to steady my hand with the other hand. I was just all nervous. That's also why my eyes were closed. My eyes were closed a lot of the way through because I was just so afraid. It was, I think, in my mind, I saw it as a major threshold, right? I knew that if I made it through, it was going to make a huge change in my career. But interestingly enough, compared to when I was at Singapore Idol, when I went to Sing China in that audition, yes, I had nerves, but it wasn't so much from a place of I want this so badly. It wasn't. Or rather, it was from I just don't want to mess up in front of these judges that I really respect. That's all. I just wanted to do a good audition so that I don't let myself down, because that had happened to me.
Well, that's
in
a
another
much healthier place to be, right?
It is.
And as you went on, so you're doing a really cool, maybe my favorite part of Sing China are the duets, and you're singing with coaches and things like that, and the other judges where it's kind of everything's competitive because you're being evaluated all the time. But I'm wondering, like, for instance, you're singing with Harlem U, or, are you at that point, this has been going on now for a long time. Are you less nervous at this point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you can tell from my body language, my facial expression, that I'm so much more at ease. And there are several reasons for this. By this stage, I had already performed, I think, a couple of songs. And this was already the quarterfinals. So meaning if I get through this round, I would go into the grand finals already. But to be honest, by this time, I was just already mind blown by how far I had gotten. I had never expected, never in my wildest dreams, I would even make it to this late in the competition.
Well,
because
you made it to grand finals.
I know, but I had seen people who were, in my opinion, much better singers than I was be eliminated. And so I was terribly lucky to be there. And so I just decided I should just enjoy myself. And we were singing, in a genre that I was very comfortable with. Harlem himself is just such a fun, character. He's just such a great personality, so open and warm. And so I just had such a great time. And funny enough, because I didn't really care whether I made it through, because I totally enjoyed it, that came through in the performances. And my votes for that particular performance were just staggering. I think I had 40 something out of 50 votes, which is mind-blowing. It's incredible.
So you mentioned Harlem. So at least you are having positive interactions despite the reality show aspect, the competitive aspect. You enjoyed that. You working with Jay Cho. How much time did you have to actually work with him outside of the spotlight, where you're in a room together and
Yeah.
or at all? What's the reality behind the reality show?
Regrettably, we only have very limited time with our mentors, and that's also understandable. They're really huge superstars. And also, Jay had just had a baby. His wife had just given birth to their second kid at the point, during the competition. So he was terribly, terribly busy. So each round, I believe, maybe each contestant would have 2 sessions of 15 minutes in person with your mentor. And so, of course, because I had been through the most number of rounds being his eventual champion, it all adds up to maybe a couple of hours. Less than a couple of hours. Yeah, a couple of hours in total with him. But I savored every moment. It was just crazy because I was, as a teenage girl, a huge fan of his, and it's just completely surreal to be in his company, for him to know my name, for him to think that I sing well. And he mentioned jazz a lot. Like I could tell that he was actually consciously trying to promote jazz on my behalf, because that he could see that was my passion. And that was just so out of this world for me. I feel like it's one thing to have your mentor change your life, but to feel like you've introduced him to something, that you've changed his taste in music just a little bit at all, that's just so empowering.
I spend a lot of time with Jay Cho in the car because my wife's always playing his stuff, so I can through the
that's a
Mandarin,
perfect. That's
totally fake,
a perfect cover.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. No, I didn't say. Okay. Yeah.
It's all right. He knows it too.
That's good. When Sing China was over, I was downstairs at Esplanade, and there's a concerto going on. I'm downstairs because percussionists are lucky to not play every piece sometimes. But don't make fun, because everything we do is a solo. So I know where you're going from. But I saw you on the monitor downstairs, and you were hosting a travel show.
They were showing my travel show in the green room.
They were
TV?
in the green room, and I was like, wait, I know this girl, and it came back again. It came back to Sing China on that. But we found a photo from a travel show you did for another network, I'm sure, because this was in English. But here you're in Bangladesh, right?
That's right. This was me hosting something for Channel U. And it's a show called Innocence Lost. And even though this is a really joyful picture, the actual content of that show was pretty heavy, because we were covering stories about child labor. But why I really love this photo, and I think it also relates back to the current crisis that we're having in Singapore with regards to our migrant workers in the dormitories. The thing is, there has been, some negative criticism from the public. In the Chinese newspapers, someone wrote in to say, these migrant workers, the reason why they're all getting infected so rapidly is because they have poor hygiene. And I was really angry when I read that, because that is not only racial discrimination, cultural discrimination, but so uninformed. I had personally been to Bangladesh, and it's a beautiful country. Of course, it has many problems, many struggles, and I regret that the topic that I was covering seemed to further reinforce that view, because I was covering a topic like child labor, and it reinforces the view that that's all the people of Bangladesh are about. But it's not. Like you saw in that photo, it was a more organic interaction on the streets. So I had a Polaroid camera, and I was taking photos, and a small crowd gathered around me, just to see the photo that I had taken. And they were so warm, they were lovely. People are just so kind. And when I look at this, I feel so sad and so almost embarrassed of Singaporeans, and I'm getting emotional here, because we treat them so unkindly, with not enough respect that they deserve. We think of them with fear and intrepidation. We look at them with suspicion. Instead, when I am there in their country, they received me with so much kindness and warmth. And I'm
Well,
sorry
you are
that we didn't
full of this
reciprocate
compassion.
that.
Mm.
Yeah, but what's going on right now, and it's really unfair. They are being infected, and yet still have to suffer so much criticism. But also, I think the beautiful thing is there has also been an outpouring of support. People have been donating. There have been volunteers, and all that is, I think, also reminds me of the fact that by and large, Singaporeans are still helpful and kind. But there are a couple of people who are maybe a little more critical, or just maybe haven't found their empathy yet, or maybe they've gone through personal experiences that lead them to be more suspicious. But yeah,
Well,
I
I think
choose
this
to
comes back to the public figure
see the
thing
better
that
side.
that
Yeah.
yeah, well, your compassion. I mean, you are, because of your role in society, like it or not, you are a role model, and
I
if
hate
you're
that I'm
not
a role
compassionate,
model,
I
though.
don't. Well,
I
you
feel
can hate
it's
it,
such a burden. It's such a burden, and often I wish I wasn't, because there are parts of me that I have my vices. Like on my own live streams, I would always be drinking, and that's a very healthy
but
portion of
Joanna,
alcoholic drink, right?
would you not wish that Singapore on the whole, or the world, listened to what you were just saying, and really, really took some time to think on it and make positive change? So, like it or not, that's where you are. But you are in a place where you are making good, and you are empathetic, and you're compassionate, and and it was even obvious when you came and sang with us. So this was 2019. You
Yeah,
came and
just
sang
last year, but it feels like a lifetime
it
ago.
does seem like a lifetime ago. You sang Dick Lee's anthem "Home," uh,
Yeah,
and we're used to doing it. It's great, and Kelly Tang's arrangement, by the way, is fantastic.
beautiful. Yeah.
We do it all the time. It's beautiful. Dick Lee did it's a phenomenal piece and all. But once again, your take was different. And in the back, some of us were talking about
I see you right
how.
at the back. That's you in the red bow tie right at the
Oh
back.
my God. Okay. I'm glad. Let's not circle that. If I had a pen right now, I'd cross that out. I was not gray when I came to Singapore, but it was almost a very. It was also very emotional in its understatement, and perhaps this is a reflection too of you, that when you sing, when you perform, it comes from a deeper meaning, and that uh, risking the cheesiness of the statement and all, but that though you actually went deeper into the words and what the words mean, and home should be something different for everyone, and you didn't do the screaming thing that I talk about, and you didn't whatever. It was just the hall was quiet, and the orchestra was it was a stunning experience, and I think you carried that same compassion and meaning with you, even to a piece we all know so well.
Well, John, I'll let you in on a secret. Well, the truth is, I had to communicate quite a bit with Joshua, the assistant conductor for SSO, who was conducting that performance. And in the rehearsal, I told him I don't have big lungs. I can't hold those really long notes. And I can't even do the crescendo. I just do not have the lung capacity for that. And so the truth is, my personal style as a singer. It happens because of my limitations as a singer, and this is counterintuitive, I think, for a lot of people who are on their journeys to becoming better as a singer. But the truth is, when I think, and this is quite relevant to the pop industry, I think what makes singers kind of stand out or memorable is not so much how able they are or how technically superior they are, but really all those little vocal flaws, or like vocal eccentricities that make them interesting. Like, so if you have a raspy voice, classically you would say that's probably a no, but in pop that's an asset. And same for me. My phrasing cannot be a beautiful long legato line, because I simply can't. I don't have enough air for that. I would love to be able to do a soaring crescendo poco a poco, but I can't, because again, I just don't have that range, or I don't have that. So what I can do is only to work within my vocal limits, and I'm good at singing quiet. I have a clean I have a clean voice, and so that's what I do. Because I don't have any, flowery technique to show off. I have to bring people back to the lyrics because that's what I'm good at. I studied literature, and so I understand, subtext, and all that. So I try to just use every single tool I have to make up for all the other things that I lack as a singer.
I think you're being very humble here, but of course, the meaning, word painting is important. There is, especially if we're talking about jazz standards, and we're going back to Gershwin Songbook, or when we hear
Yeah.
Ella or Sarah Vaughan or any of these people, or Billie Holiday singing these tunes, you could, you could find. I don't want to get struck down by lightning because I adore her, but Billie Holiday, people could say, "Oh, but what kind of vibrato is that?" Or what? She wouldn't be able to. But you listen
Oh
to the
yeah, but
words and
the
the
emotions,
expressiveness.
yeah.
She has her own line. As to you, this is not a weak. You just find your real strengths and you're making the most of them.
I do
So
have to say that this is, and this is my personal philosophy, that it is the prerogative of the singer to truly get deep into the lyrics, because all the other instruments do not have the privilege of having words. Everybody else has to express everything through the melody, your pitch, your rhythm. It's only the singers who have the benefit of semantics, of the use of words. And so we better make good use of that. It is a privilege, but also our burden to have to tell the story, as well as it deserves.
I asked you earlier in the week what
Yes.
languages you could go through. So are you willing to do this for me and our audience?
Sure.
All right. So sing me a line or two in English.
Sure as Kilimanjaro rises like Olympus across the Serengeti. I love that lyric.
Okay. Give us a little Mandarin.
但愿人长久，千里共婵娟。
All right. Let's do a little Cantonese.
無限最啱一天，前來贈你光線。 It's like on the
Wow.
darkest day, we'll send you some light.
Let's
Yeah.
stick with Chinese. Hakka.
落水天，落水天，落水落到愛嘅心邊。It's rainy
Wow.
day.
So it's not just words. There are inflections by language too, in the singing too,
yes.
huh?
Oh yes. Yeah. And if you don't choose, especially in like Cantonese, for example, if you don't include the inflections in your melody, it doesn't really come across, because every word means a different thing. And so that's interesting when you try and cover a song, and translate it into Cantonese. You almost can't just stick to the original melody. You have to include those little inflections within the melody so that the words make sense. And that's hard.
Amazing.
I'm not really good at it either. Probably butchering it, but
Bahasa Malaysia.
Getaran jiwa melanda hatiku. It's a beautiful P. Ramlee thing, which and again,
Okay.
metaphors of melody and music, for love. Yeah.
Wow, from rain to metaphors of love. Japanese.
Yeah. Kawawa nakarete doko doko iku no. It's
Well, you
from
even
a
got a
song
little
called Hana.
kawaii there.
No. Kawawa
Wow.
nakarete. I don't. So that's the thing. I can sing in so many languages, and I have, when I was a choir girl, we did so many choral pieces in all sorts of languages. But the truth is, I don't really understand. And when I don't understand those languages, if I'm not really much of a speaker, then it's hard. I do always make a point to Google and find the line by line translation for each song so that I can at least deliver the meaning. But there's always nuances that are going to be lost when you're not a native speaker of that language, and it's something that I respect. And I try not to do too many of these songs and pretend that I understand it. I always always preface it with, I hope I'm not misrepresenting anything. Yeah.
Try not to misrepresent Korean. How's that?
Oh no. I'll cheat because I have my phone here and
Okay.
I have the lyrics.
Okay.
But 지나가는 계절 속에 내 마음은 변하지 않는다는 걸 알아요. So this is a pop song that I had to cover recently for another performance where it was like a theme song from a TV series. Yeah.
Wow. All right, I'm going to rapid fire you through Europe.
Sure.
Spanish.
Bésame, bésame mucho.
Nice, of course. French.
Je ne veux pas travailler, non, je ne veux pas déjeuner.
Wow. And Deutsch, German.
Ich liebe dich so, wie du mich am Abend und am Morgen. I used to sing this as a child when I was taking classical voice lessons.
I'm just so overwhelmed with all you're doing musically, but also, again, you're such an important person right now for us to look up to and
no, John. The thing is, we are all important, and we all have to not only believe that, but we have to rise up to that. We're all important because this COVID-19 affects all of us, and if just one of us is not cooperating, then it's all for naught. And so there is no point in recent history where each of us and each of our actions, really affect the entire community. So yeah, we're all important.
We are, and it's going to take everyone working together here. Thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing. I'm more of a fan now than
thank you, John.
I was when this started, and really appreciate it. And how can people find you online?
Well, if you just run a search for me on Facebook, so just type in my name, Joanna Dong, I'll probably be one of the first few hits. Same thing for Instagram, just search my name, Joanna Dong, and you should find me.
We would do that. Thank you for sharing all that with us, and all the best. We'll be seeing and hearing from you regularly, I'm sure. Thanks, Joanna.
See you soon, John.
All right. Good night.